Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for coming. My name is Lucy Shackleton. I'm Head of Public Policy and Partnerships at UCL European Institute, and we've curated two sessions on EU careers for the Department of Political Science Careers Week 2022. As a reminder, this is going to be recorded and we'll have some people joining us online, but we'll also make available the recording in the days following the event. So this session is about sort of EU and diplomatic careers, and we're really privileged to have two speakers with us today, one in person, Marit Silevi from the EU delegation to the UK, and Ed Biffle also joining us from Brussels, the UK mission to the EU. Ed, can you hear us? I think so.
Yeah, loud and clear.
Perfect, great. And they're going to be able to tell us a little bit, give us a privileged insight into what it's really like to represent the EU in the United Kingdom and the UK in Brussels at this time of change. Thank you very much for coming, both of you. Just very briefly, you've got Marit's details on a slide there, but she's got a fantastic experience across communications, public relations, and stakeholder engagement. She works currently on EU citizens' rights issues at the EU delegation, but previously had a comms role within the cabinet of the European Commission President, and before that worked in London for a reputation management consultancy working with FTSE 100 companies. She's got a bachelor's degree in journalism and public relations from the University of Tartu and an MSc in communication, regulation and policy from the LSE. Marit, I'm going to hand over to you first, and also to our very helpful student moderators, and then we'll pass to Ed, and then there'll be plenty of time for Q&A.
Lovely, yeah. So really quickly, we'll just introduce ourselves. My name is Nikki LaValle. I am a master's student in the human rights course here at UCL, finishing up in September. So excited to hear all sorts of things on this topic to get myself out there.
And my name is Tamara. I'm doing the security studies course part-time. So this is my second year, and just like Nikki, we graduate in September. So yeah, this week has been honestly amazing, and this is just such a great opportunity to delve deeper into EU jobs. Yeah, thank you so much for being with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, and I'm glad there is interest in working for the EU. I'm very proud to work for the EU, and I think it is a great place to work, but obviously I would say that anyway. I didn't really set out my career to be working in Brussels, so working for the EU. I don't have a background in EU policies, or I didn't think I wanted to go to work in Brussels, but I was good. What I was good at is sorting things out. I was good at working with colleagues from international background in multicultural environment, and that is why I found myself in Brussels, and I must say it's working for the EU is one of the. You're surrounded by professional, committed colleagues who you were just, they are very, very talented. And you are also sort of aware of the decisions being made in Brussels around you and how it impacts not just you, but the whole of the EU and the whole of the world sometimes. And there are so many, there is no one way, there are so many opportunities to grow and change. And this is what really appeals to me. And that really brings me to my first point, that if you think about the career for the EU, it's never really like one trajectory that you go in and you progress on one policy area. It's always you can switch within EU institutions, you can switch within policy areas, you can also switch the countries where you work in, because EU has offices obviously in Brussels and Luxembourg, but there are in all the EU countries there are offices, there are different agencies, and then there are delegations outside of the EU. So there are opportunities all around the world. And in that sense, it's a very, very unique place to work. And you can quite easily, the mobility is encouraged. the current EU ambassador to the UK. He's Portuguese, and he likes to tell a story of how his career has been in the EU. He started in the 1980s, just before Portugal joined the EU, in the local Portugal office as somebody with a temporary contract. He then got a different other job, moved on to Brussels. At some point, he was the Commission spokesperson in Brussels. He was exchanging on a daily basis with Boris Johnson, who was a journalist at that time in Brussels. He later on became the head of cabinet of the European Commission president, and then he was EU ambassador in Washington, and then in UN in New York, and now he's in the UK. So, well, that's an ideal career trajectory. It doesn't happen to everybody, but it just tells you that you can end up anywhere. And I have been myself, I'm sort of, I don't know, beginning of my career in the EU, but I've had different contracts. I've been a trainee, I've had short-term contracts, I have a permanent contract. I've been working in the Commission services, but also with the Commission political leadership, and I've been working in different institutions. So now with the EAS, I can already see that this mobility is excellent, and that is why I really recommend this as a place to go and work. But where do you start then? That brings me to the second point. In my view, that traineeship in the Commission or in the EU is a very good way in. A lot of people do that, and I myself, I started as a trainee, and I think I was very lucky. But it was a fantastic experience when I came. I landed in the press team of a service which. How to say it was at the time, it was in charge of telecoms policy, and it was at the time when and I don't know if you remember when you used to travel across countries, you used to have to pay roaming charges. You're too young to remember that. But, and so at the time when I joined the Commission as a trainee in this press team, this was the policy team this was policy team in charge of the roaming regulation, and it was the time when it was adopted. And so my team was doing lots and lots of communication across the EU, and I was giving interviews to Estonian media explaining how the EU is doing great thing for EU citizens. And it was from day one, you were in the team, they were inviting me to give ideas on how to communicate and what sort of campaigns we should be doing, what we should not be doing and saying, and what kind of messages could work in some member states and some member states not. So I got a lot of responsibility. I was, and I know that this was the same experience of a lot of my colleagues who were trainees at the time. And almost every single EU institution has their own traineeship programs. So you can apply for the European Commission, but there are all these different agencies and different ones based in Brussels, but also in Luxembourg, in Strasbourg, in Frankfurt, the central bank. There are different ways to get in, and the Commission one is the most competitive one. I have been told that unless you have 2 languages and a master's degree and some relevant work experience, it's very difficult to get selected. But the smaller the institution, the easier it is to get in. And I think I'll share with Lucy later a link with all the information where you have the list of all the institutions, and you can see which programs they have, when is the deadline of application, and what is the salary. Usually all the traineeships are paid, but it differs per institution. That was my second point. And a traineeship is also a way to get to know whether you actually like working there, whether you like the institution, and then if you do, there are possibilities to stay on with a temporary contract, which I managed to do. But then, if you want to stay in the EU permanently, or if you manage to get past the competition, which gives you a permanent job, then, and that would be my third recommendation, is then you really should look or study the institution or study the particular, think about where do you want to go. Don't just apply to every single, there are temporary positions you can apply, but don't just apply everywhere with the purpose of I just want to, I just want to get a job in the EU because I know that they probably give me good salary. It's just gonna waste your resources and waste the resources of people who evaluate the CVs. But there are lots of temporary roles you can apply for as well, and I'll send you the link with where all the information is up there. And there are hundreds of roles at the moment available. They're always updated. But so what I did is I spent some time in Brussels, but then I got this job in London for the reputation management consultancy, which I loved. I worked with lots of interesting companies. So my clients were Heineken, Unilever, Goodyear. So I helped them with stakeholder engagement, with reputation management, with issues management. And I also was able to give them advice how to deal with stakeholders in Brussels, because I was sold as a Brussels expert, even though I'd been in Brussels only for 6 months, but 7 months, but nobody in London seemed to know much about how to deal with stakeholders in Brussels. And I saw that in my very intelligent team, none of them had been to Brussels or knew anything about how EU was working. So even my limited knowledge was already very useful. And while I was in London, I kept an eye on the openings in Brussels, and I entered some competition and I passed one, which I was very happy about. But if you pass a competition for a permanent role in the EU, it doesn't come with a job. You are in a list of, you're in a reserve list, and you need to still find an opening. So, and if you don't find an opening, then in a certain point of time, your reserve list expires, and then you need to pass a new competition. So even though I loved my job in London, I didn't want to lose this opportunity to not get a job in Brussels, and I started to look for it. And I started, I kind of tried to think of where I want to end up with, and I took my experience from London. That I wanted to work in the EU, but I wanted to work close to the political leadership of the Commission if I can. And my experience from the private sector told me that there are some teams within a big organization which always have a very direct access to the leadership of the company. And this team is always, many organizations, this team is the one that is in charge of media analysis or media monitoring, because the company leaders are always obsessed with what the media is writing about them. And so I was starting to look for openings, like I'm starting to see in Brussels, where is this equivalent in the European Commission? And there is this media monitoring and analysis unit, which happened to have an opening, and I applied, and I pitched myself as somebody who can come in, can help to do the best analysis in the world, and can then provide the commissioners, the political leadership of the Commission, with some advice on how to manage the media relations as well. And it worked. So I got this job, and I got it because I was able to sort of make myself relevant and find a job that interests me, but also explain them how my skills will be beneficial. And so if you are looking for even the temporary roles in the Commission, is look at the long list, but then try to pin down what is your interest, and does it actually, if your application doesn't give relevance in that for this particular job, then it's very unlikely that you will be called for an interview. And the job, it was, I can tell you a lot about how it was long hours and very intense. And I think at some point I was the most informed person about what the whole of the EU media is writing about the EU. And I loved it a lot, but I think I would have stayed longer if I didn't have learned about another opening. And that brings me to my last point, which is that you always meet some people twice, at least twice. And that is why in at least that's true in the EU institutions, it's true in the rest of the world. And I tell you what I mean about this. So when the head of the cabinet of the European Commission president when I heard that he was looking for a policy assistant, I tried to apply for that role. And as it happened, this person who was the head of cabinet, he was actually also the spokesperson, the former spokesperson who was in charge of the roaming regulation, when I worked as a trainee with him. So I had worked with him years back. And so he knew me and he knew how I had worked. And I think it helped a lot for me to get that particular job. And I think if I had not put in an effort as a trainee and leave a professional impression at that time, maybe I would not have been able to get the job in the cabinet of the European Commission president in the end. And it happens to be, I think it is the case a lot in the EU institutions, that people change a lot and then somebody becomes someone more influential, and then if you know them, they can help you or they can bring you along to different jobs. At the moment, I stayed in the cabinet until the end of the President Juncker mandate. And now I'm in London looking after EU citizens there are many in the UK. And we're working with EU member states and the UK Home Office to ensure that the EU citizens' rights are protected after Brexit. And I am here still for another couple of years. And after that, I'm not yet sure, but I know that there are loads of opportunities for me in the EU. And it's a great place to work. I really recommend it. And I'm so that we stop here.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, for our next assignment, we would like to introduce.
We have Ed joining us virtually. Can you still hear us?
That again.
Lovely. So we're going to kick it off with, we're going to pass it over to Ed, and then we'll have all of your questions. So if you have things that are coming up for you, definitely add them into the chat or write them down if you're not logged in virtually. And we will have, roughly 20 minutes or so to be moving through those. So keep thinking.
I'd like to just introduce Ed. He studied Chinese at Oxford and Peking universities and joined the civil service in the in 2018. He also spent 2 years working on trade, the business, energy, and industrial strategy. Then did an MA in service scholarship. Since September 2021, he has been on a secondment to the UK mission to the EU in Brussels, covering a range of policies, including services, trade, emerging technologies, and universities. Thank you so much for being with us, Ed. Floor is yours.
Thanks very much. Can people hear and see me okay?
Yes, perfect.
Great. So hi, thanks for the introduction. That is, so I started my civil service career about 4 years ago, and similarly didn't originally think that I would go necessarily to Brussels, but that's something that I was always sort of aware of, and something that particularly obviously became more aware of during the referendum campaign and other things that happened while I was at university that raised the profile of the EU and domestic politics in the UK. So while I was still at university, I did a couple of internships in sort of public affairs sort of roles, one at a think tank, one in a consultancy doing research on China, and I worked there on a contract for the DG Trade, so the part of the EU which does external trade policy. And then on finishing my time at university, I applied for the civil service fast stream graduate scheme, and similarly to what we just covered from the EU side, that's sort of it's like a graduate entry role to join the civil service, and you go in and you're assigned. You have some sort of indication of preference, but you're just assigned a job and you do it for a bit, and then you get rotated into another one and so on. And I from there moved into a permanent role doing EU trade, and then that team sponsored me firstly to do a master's in EU international relations, and then also to come to Brussels and directly work on EU trade files in Brussels. So my role here is a lot about connecting, obviously, with the EU institutions, so the European Commission and the European member states and Parliament, but also what the wider stakeholder bubble, as it's referred to. So people who work on public affairs, or people who do advocacy, work in think tanks, civil society groups that are interested in the policy areas that I cover. And I cover quite a wide range of things. So going from international trade in services over to universities policy and to areas of industrial policy like emerging technologies, things like quantum computing, semiconductors. And that, I mean, I really enjoy it. I think it's a really good varied set of roles, and you see a lot of different bits of how Brussels works and how third countries interact with Brussels, as the UK is now interacting from the outside, as it were, and also get to do some really, really interesting, valuable bits of public policy. So I definitely recommend that sort of role and that sort of career approach. I think that there's some really interesting things, although I definitely echo the sentiment that it's worth finding roles that suit your CV and that really interest you, rather than sort of spraying applications for everything. I think in terms of how to get into things from the UK side, there's quite a wide range of opportunities, and the UK government is relatively equal opportunities high in terms of eligibility. So you don't need to be British or to be a British citizen to work for H&G. And broadly speaking, as long as you have the right to work in the UK, you can do most civil service roles. And indeed, a lot of the roles in the UK mission to the EU are also open to people who have the right to work in Belgium. So we hire people locally here who may be obviously Belgian citizens, but also people from other EU member states, or people who benefit from right to work under the long-term residence directive. So say, for example, if you had the right to residency in another EU member state and then you moved to Belgium to take up a role with the UK mission, that would be possible. So there's quite a wide range of opportunities for people to work on the UK side of EU relations. And we have internship programs in the summer each year. So we have a spring week style one called the Early Diversity Internship Program. We have a summer long one called the Summer Diversity Internship Program. And then also there are various internships run by departments, including the UK Mission to the EU has its own 3-month internships, which are available to people immediately after graduating, graduate students and so on. And these are all paid, I should clarify. All UK government internships are fully paid. So there are different options there for sort of kickstarting a career in sort of EU affairs through the UK civil service. And there will also be some entry-level jobs, which would probably be at the grades either executive officer or higher executive officer, that you can access from outside the civil service. Most civil service jobs are normally advertised to people primarily who work in the civil service already. So one thing you can do there is apply for a job that looks moderately interesting or in the right department, and then move from there. But also reasonably often either applying for one of the main grad schemes or just watching out for jobs that do become available. You may find that there's something of interest and relevant to some of the policy areas that you guys have been studying at university or that you'd be interested in branching out to. And it doesn't have to be something that you've necessarily done precisely yourself. So, like, for example, my undergraduate research and focuses were on China, and then I did a bit of geopolitics and trade, looked at the Belt and Road Initiative and the investments that China made in Pakistan, and then also did some on digital policy in China, particularly around Chinese state social media policy and how they used social media to amplify narratives from the People's Daily. But I didn't do work precisely on trade and services, but I still managed to move into that role here. And the civil service is very into training people to do new roles, and takes often quite a generalist approach to how people develop into roles and what how much training can be done on the job, as opposed to how much you should be pre-qualified for things. And that will vary. There'll be roles where it will be very advantageous to have a language already, or to particularly for analyst roles, to have some qualifications already that really show you can do that work. But a lot of roles will be generalist, especially on the policy making side. So there's a wide range of things that you can go for if they interest you and you think that you're up for learning a lot about it once you've taken the job on. So I think that's yeah, there's a wide range of options, and there's no reason not to give a go to most of the things that you think would be interesting, especially when you're applying in London. I think also, I can't speak to this directly, but certainly a lot of people I know out here and my friends and so on in the EU bubble find that there's a wide range of other sort of wider options that you can look at the same time and have similar skill sets, say working in consulting roles or in advocacy for civil society, also in the European Parliament, where people are open to taking people who are either leaving undergrad or probably more likely possible leaving a master's with some level of internship experience, but there are roles available, and so there's quite a wide range of different options you can have sort of straight out to give a good go to starting a career in Brussels and in the Brussels bubble. And certainly I know a fair few people from my master's program who hadn't had extensive work experience before, who now got jobs in Brussels, in the European Parliament, in public policy, either on the consulting side or on the think tank side, and those jobs do exist at the moment, which is really good, because obviously it's not in every sector that there's a huge amount of entry-level jobs available all the time. So I think, yeah, to close on sort of the general points I've been making, there's a lot of opportunities in the civil service to do EU affairs still. We're very, very engaged with the EU, and we have extensive and very policy intensive conversations with the EU on a huge range of topics, both the ones that are governed by the Trade and Cooperation Agreement, but also ones that are not. And there's a lot of appetite in the civil service for having young, capable, motivated people take on some of these roles. Obviously, if you've been following the news, you've seen that the UK civil service is meant to be undergoing a bit of a haircut in overall numbers, but we don't necessarily know exactly how this will affect recruitment. So I would definitely still say that it's a good time to at least put applications in. The worst that can happen is that they say no, and it's really like a really good place I found to start a career, to have a lot of time and investment in you as a person to go on training courses, learn about new policy areas, understand how policy gets made, how we analyze evidence, working impartially, and really, yeah, just deepening your understanding of policy making and politics as you go through the start of your career.
Great, thank you very much. Well, thank you very much, Ed. We'll now open the floor for questions, if anyone has questions in the room for either of our guests today. Okay, we can come back. We have questions as well. To begin with, I would like to ask both of you if you can just give us an idea of how it was when you graduated, and how easy was it to get into the job that you are right now? Can you just let us know about the journey and
To get to the job I am now,
yeah,
from when I graduated.
yes.
Oh,
Seeing as we're all students, you can give us an idea.
it's so crazy. It's super easy.
All right.
About that first step on the journey as well.
It's a good question, because I didn't really think about that.
We wanted to surprise you.
Yeah, so when I graduated my bachelor's, which was in communication and journalism, it was a very, it sort of like gives you a generalist background, and it means that you can pretty much go anywhere. And I was actually envying a lot of my other friends of mine who knew exactly what they wanted to do, that they had studies in social policy or environment or languages, so they kind of knew what their career was. I was never one of those persons, and that is why I chose more of a generalist approach, and that is why when somebody told me about this traineeship in Brussels, I thought, well, that's great. I had studied abroad for a semester, and I really liked working in an environment with where you have different people and different nationalities, and this seemed like a good opportunity. So I I think I just took it one step at a time. And everything fell from there. You meet people, you create your networks, you realize what interests you, you know more about what your skills are. The more you are in your work, you don't, I think it's important that you don't start or think like, okay, if I need a career in law and this is all I want to do, I think this is daunting as well, that you're going to be ending up doing that. We're going to be working for a long time, and we can have many jobs during in the course of our career, but the most important thing is you choose something that, at least one thing that you like about it, you try to choose a role there, and then it falls from there.
I think that's a good takeaway. I think about like my generation, our generation of folks, most people in the room, like at least my parents come from the era of you pick a job when you're like 24 and you stick with it perhaps until the rest of time. Like my mom worked for Verizon for 39 years. And so when I like hear that, I think like, oh no, like, are we stuck before we're 30? Are we stuck before we're 35? So I think it's a good idea to just like, how can we retain that patience and recognize that we can't see the end, but like it will come. Something that
I'm not a sprint. It's something I like to keep in mind.
certainly, something that I'm curious about is always like the softer skills. So are there things that you've learned, maybe even outside of like organized positions, that you feel like allow you to do your work on the day to day? Ed, you can answer this too. Sorry, we're kind of keeping a siloed here.
Yeah, no worries. And I'd say, I mean, definitely echo on the first question as well. I don't have such a illustrious career, so I can't draw such a long thread of cabinets I worked in. But absolutely agree that you don't have to pick one place to start and stay there. And the UK civil service, but also a lot of other Brussels bubble jobs are very flexible with people having worked different roles, and it's really useful to cross-pollinate those experiences. On the soft skills side, I think, hugely. I think one of the most important things in public affairs, whether you're working in government, whether you're working in politics, whether you're working in consulting or in a think tank or anything, is soft skills and knowing when and how to listen in particular, because ultimately especially in Brussels, but also in London and other places, you're only as effective in your role as the information that you have access to. And the best way to have access to information is to be a good listener and to understand people. And I always trying to work on that, always trying to meet new people and understand new perspectives. And I think a big challenge for that for British people is learning new languages, but you try your best. And there's a lot of things you can do to work on that in all sorts of different walks of life. But I think also good workplaces will invest in training and in mentoring for their employees, particularly at the start of their career, to help them develop in that.
Thank you. And do you have thoughts on the soft skills? Or
I think these are the key skills. Of course, you need the expertise, but to the ability to listen, to be just a nice, kind person is also, it seems trivial, but when I was working in the president's cabinet, it's a very high stress environment. Can be often where things are happening. You have to immediately write the briefing or write a statement. You need to collect information, and when you have people harassing you, yelling at you from different services, saying this is wrong or this is wrong, you're never gonna work with them again. And then in your career, you meet them again maybe, and they are in a different position, and you know that this person is never going to get a job with you because they're just not professional. And it's always good to try to be nice and professional, but what is also important, and I learned that a lot also in the cabinet of the president, that you have to not have a, it also sounds like a cliche, but have a wider perspective. That basically I was often contacted by people from different services saying, oh, our policy is very important. Why is not the president saying anything on this? And then somebody else saying, but our policy is very most important. But they don't know that, yes, your policy is very important, but at the same time, the president has 15 other things he needs to prioritize. And we are trying to see how all this pans out in the context of I don't know, another G20 summit where 15 topics are being discussed. And so you can, if you are an expert on one particular policy and you want to pursue it, you just need to also keep in mind that this sits in a very in a wider perspective, in a wider world, and you need to just be aware of that. That's just a helpful thing to be.
We actually have a question in the chat. I'm just going to read it out. It's by Travis. He says, how would the panelists recommend building your career networks from outside as in outside an EU organization? Is there a central place to get the contacts of people in hiring positions? For instance, are young people relegated to sending a CV into either, or is there a way to be proactive?
Well, I can only respond on EU institutions side that I think for young people, especially, the best way in is really to try the different traineeship roles. There is no such thing as, at least for the EU, you have people in charge of employing, but these people are either they are employing the trainees or they are employing people who have already passed the competition. So it's either you try to pass competitions or you try to get a traineeship, which then I am absolutely certain will lead to a temporary contract or a permanent contract, if you are interested in it, because that's what most trainees will do if they're good.
I see Ed is nodding away. Can you give us
I completely agree. And I've got a lot of friends from my master's program who've done Blue Book and Schumann traineeships in the last year. And I would just absolutely, it's a grind to get those traineeships, especially the Blue Book. It's very competitive. But of the people I know who did it, and I know really quite a few, every single person who really cared about the role and was committed to it, they got offered an intérimaire contract agent position afterwards. Most of them have now passed the CAST exam, and it's obviously you can't ever guarantee this because the CAST positions are advertised, but hiring managers are going to look favorably on people that they've already worked with, and so they're absolutely the best way to some of these jobs, as far as I'm aware from this, is to do the traineeships, and that is a great way to get to know people. But I think also alongside that, another thing that's important in terms of what we refer to as networking isn't just going to an event like this and then swapping business cards with people and sort of meeting people who have cool sounding jobs, but also it's keeping up and taking an interest in people who you know well, and if you're sort of involved in your classmates and their friends' career ambitions, and you support each other through the next few years in particular, and you have people that you know and respect in terms of the academic work you've done together, and you keep those relationships going into your early career, that's the most valuable network you can cultivate, I would say, at this point in time while you're still at university. And some of the people that I knew while I was at university now have really interesting roles, and it's really good that I know them and they know me and we trust each other. And I think that that's an aspect of networking which you can miss sometimes when you're still at university. But when you get into the workplace, some of those people you've already formed connections with will be some of the people who are most valuable to you in your network, because it's really about quality of relationships as much as the role that those people have. But in terms of the thing that's going to get you a job offer in the immediate term, I completely agree that traineeships is the best way to go.
I have a bit of a selfish question. If no one else has one right now. So previous to doing my master's here at UCL, I was managing sales teams. And I feel like I sold my soul a little in doing that. And I think ethically, I wasn't super aligned with it. And that's why I'm studying human rights now. But I like the pace at which it went. I think every single day I was learning something new. I felt like I had influence within a couple of years of being at the organization. I moved up to a manager at 24. It was just awesome to feel like if you had, the effort and the skills, people were ready to serve you titles and time and give you the space. And I think having come to the UK and thinking about, academia and government, all of these places where things move incredibly slowly. There's a lot of value to that because like things are not, you know, oscillating from left to right constantly in that way. But I think the thing that I really struggle with is when I like look at trying to get my next job or my first job in this sector, how I can like be patient and think about like the bureaucracy not getting to me in a way. Like literally selfishly, like that's the thing I'm most stressed about is like walking in every day and feeling like a cog in a machine that's like not valued, not being listened to, not like cared for. And I guess like if you have any personal anecdotes or thoughts on like ways to manage that and still feel like you're kind of winning along the way, that would be useful to my mental health. Or you could just say you're a super patient person that like doesn't feel that way, and that would be fine as well.
No, I wouldn't say that. I think I would say I'm one of the least. I think some of my friends, the phrase I was using sometimes, like, I'm gonna punch you in the face when somebody was not doing what I thought they were supposed to be doing. I never actually did, obviously. I think you need to look. I'm not sure where exactly you were looking for the next role, but to deal with human rights, for me, it doesn't. I don't think about bureaucracy, or I don't think about slow moving processes. I know that, for instance, in one of the EU institutions in EAS, there is a particular unit that deals with human rights defenders, and this is a very, very dynamic team which is in touch with human rights defenders in different countries, and they are working there very long hours. It's actually quite stressful, and you are definitely not sitting around thinking things are not moving. So I don't think you would need to worry. This area is such a dynamic area that you will find.
And I appreciate that because I know that the hours will be required. Like I think like long hours are definitely mandatory. I'm almost thinking about like all the stuff that you're up against to make those hours like turn into something useful. Like the powers that are against you, the economic forces, all of that. That's like usually in contrast with like progressing human rights forward. But
then if you're not there, then nobody else is doing that job.
Well, I appreciate that.
Ed, do you have any?
Yeah, sure. So I certainly agree that the role I do here is extremely fast-paced, especially when there's a minister in town or senior officials visiting, or say, for example, one of the technical specialized committees happening on the TCA, something like that. Then that is something that happens fast. Or at least, you spend a year preparing it, but the week in which it happens still happens very fast. And so there's a lot that's fast paced, and there's a lot that's exciting. And I think also I would say that there is such a variation of role. I mean, there are over 400,000 jobs in the civil service, just the UK civil service, and that doesn't even include people who are hired overseas for the Foreign Office. So the range of roles is incredible, and the same for the Commission, the same for the EAS, for so many different areas of public policy and public affairs, that you can find jobs that are slow and like very, very processy and reward people who are patient and just want to get everything right. And you can find jobs where you have to work late into the night randomly, and it'll be fast paced, and you'll have to like ring people up in other countries. And there's a role for everybody. There's so much going on. And also, I do know people who were managers in my department at 24, so it can happen. And if
we'd love to hear that.
If you really want to manage big teams, that's absolutely possible in the civil service. If you really want to work on things like sales, where you're like, doing comms or doing trade promotion or something, like there are different aspects of those sorts of roles which do exist in the civil service as well.
Thank you. We actually have two questions in the chat. I'll start off with the first one. Julian's asking, what and how many languages do you recommend learning before applying for a traineeship in the EU?
So for with my official slides, I think for the traineeship, you would need 2 languages. If so, and one of them should be English, French, or German. And there is no previous work experience needed. But I think there might be some institutions which don't actually will be with 1 language is enough, but you'll just need to check. But 2 languages is essential for the work in the EU, and also for your knowledge. If you want to get your first promotion in the EU, then you need to have 3 languages. So that's, but luckily the Commission, at least, and the EU institutions will provide a lot of extensive language training courses for everybody. So once you're in there, you can during working hours can take language courses and work on your 3rd languages.
Oh, wow.
So that's what I did, and it was hard.
I can imagine. Ed, do you have anything to add just on that question?
Firstly, I would say that the same, that the UK civil service, especially if you're in a role where it's relevant, but also often when it's not directly relevant, we do a lot of funded in-work language training. I've done courses of Chinese and courses of French during my time in civil service. And also, I would say, especially for the Blue Book, if you're going to put a language on your application, prove that, like, make sure you have documentation of your ability to speak the language, because if it is part of your application, then they accept you, and then they get to the auditing stage and you can't prove it, then that will be a problem.
Oh, wow. Thank you. The second question is by Maria. She's saying, thank you very much for your insights. She's wondering if you could tell us more about the skills that an EU traineeship candidate should have to distinguish himself or herself, given that these traineeships are highly competitive. Thank you so much in advance.
So I can say that I think you need to make, because there are so many applicants, well, first of all, apply for as many traineeship in different institutions as you can apply for as many as you want. But once you have been accepted by 1 institution, then you can only do 1. So that's one thing you should know. When you make your application, you just need to make it very relevant to, you need to show, but for the Commission one, you need to choose 2 or 3 different Commission services, which your CV corresponds the most with. And so, for instance, if you have an environmental studies background, you can say that I choose DG Environment as my first choice, and here's why: because I've studied it, because I've maybe done some volunteer work in it, because this is what I want to do in the future. So you have to make your choice relevant to your experience. And if you don't have a specific policy experience like I did, you would need to think how to actually, because you can make yourself, you can look at other skills that you have. Like every Commission service or every institution has a communication unit where they need people with different skills, media monitoring, analysis skills. There is a legal unit everywhere. So if you have a background in law, you can also be relevant to any Commission service. There is a protocol unit in many of the, at least in the Parliament and the Commission and the Council. And this is a very interesting unit in my view, because they are the ones who are in charge of organizing all these high-level visits, the European Council summits, making sure that the flags are in the right place, and organizing the, I think it's fascinating. You need to organize the diplomatic presence to when somebody is visiting. So you just need to be quite specific. This will make your application stand out if you are specific in what you want, but also showing that you have relevant experience, and what it's kind of based on points. So you get a point if you have a master's degree, you get a point if you have relevant volunteer work, relevant work, and also keep it short. This was told me as well, that these people get, loads and loads and loads of evaluators get a lot of applications, and you don't stand out if you have 2 pages of motivation.
We only have like 5 minutes left, so if anyone in the room or anyone wants to add in the chat,
I don't know if Ed would like to answer that question as well. Ed, if you have any insight.
Not much to add really. I don't have as much direct experience on the way that the EU institutions process applications, but I would definitely just on the final point absolutely echo that, you know, if your application is not easy to read, then it's not going to be easy to accept. So simplicity, hit the key points as much as possible, like have brevity and really focusing on the things that you think are going to sell you to this job is always worth focusing on over exhaustive detail.
Next year in January, the European External Action Service is actually opening a young professionals program. I think in the whole month of January is when you can apply. I'll also put that link in there. That will be, I think, useful for you as well. Or interesting.
Great, thank you very much.
Any final comments?
Final question from me, which is if you could give the students online and here today one piece of advice to bear in mind as they kind of embark on their careers, what would it be?
I was wondering the same thing.
Ed, do you want to go first?
I'm gonna need to think about that. I'm not sure I'm experienced enough to have much advice worth dispensing, but I'll give it a go. Certainly would say that, like, keep up with people that you've met at UCL or where you've studied before, and the breadth and depth of your professional network of people you already know and get on with, like I said before, is something that hopefully will be invaluable, especially if you go to a top university like UCL. And then also, yeah, don't feel like you're stuck in one career, because ultimately we're all very young. It's completely possible to switch careers, and the civil service and also the institutions and so on really appreciate having people who worked in law firms, who worked in academia and so on, because of the perspectives and the technical skills they bring. So don't feel like you're making a big commitment to one thing when you leave university and take your first couple of jobs, because you can switch later. And a lot of the best and most committed civil servants I work with are people who've had previous careers in quite radically different areas.
Any final questions before we close? Okay, so on the topic of jobs, and if you're feeling motivated or you're feeling scared, either way, you can go to the political science LinkedIn, where there's loads of opportunities for internships, jobs, everything there, some advice as well. So we're trying to push that, get everyone kind of in one space. It's a good place to network as well. So if you have a LinkedIn, definitely follow that page. If you don't have a LinkedIn, this is inspiration to get one set up.